So you were receiving a wealth of information from Chris. He's in the past worked at places like Motorola, RGA, IA Collective, and he's been doing this for quite a while. But if you ask him, you can pick up on some really important things to Chris, such as he is a native Chicagoan. He has been a rescue cat dad, who I'm not seeing in the back, and I can't remember if you still have your buddy who is also gray and matches your background perfectly. Who's a good cat. And Chris also knows some of the best hikes in Seattle, in the surrounding area. So I have a little map of recommendations from Chris in the past. So if you're full up on your knowledge about portfolios, at least he can give you some good knowledge on how to get out into the open and enjoy life as a cat person, as a dad, as a geek, and maybe some excellent Chicago tidbits along the way. Chris, welcome. We're so excited to have you here today.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, thanks for the introduction, Luce and Larry. That was very flattering and nice, and far more than I was expecting.
All true.
Yeah, well, thanks for the invite, Luce. Everyone here, Luce is all sorts of great, and she's like the ultimate networker. So it's like a legitimate job skill to be like her friend and to like kind of take advantage of her network. It can like make or break your career. So yeah, she's a good one to know, as is I recognized about a quarter or a third of the instructors on Larry's slide there, and they are all great people to learn from. So I'll kind of +1 on some of those, like Lloyd and Tim in particular. I know really well. So anyway, yeah, thanks for having me. Can you see my slides okay? My title slide here okay as well?
We're all good.
Okay, cool. Well, hi, SVC. My name is Chris Andonian, and as it's been pointed out, I'm a senior design recruiter, or I kind of lead recruitment for a group at Amazon called the Device Design Group, or DDG. And for one, I'll put this at the end of my presentation, but this is my LinkedIn. Feel free to hit me up there if you want to follow up with any questions about anything that I talk about in here. Quick disclaimer, like this is typical Amazon. I have to say that these opinions are my own and not Amazon's, and I'm not necessarily speaking on behalf of Amazon. But I'll sprinkle in kind of a lot of my own 2 cents on things, and I can't help but like include a lot of the stuff that's like mostly relevant to Amazon, but I'll try and broaden it a little bit as we talk about this stuff, and I can talk about, design industry at large. Let's see. Go to next slide. My computer shut me down. Hold on. There we go. So a bit more of an introduction, then I'll get into content, I promise. I was updating. I've been giving a version of this presentation for a little while now, and I usually include a slide like this. And I was shocked when I was updating the years that I've been doing this. Like this used to say I've been doing this for 10, and then for 12 and 14, and I can't believe I've been doing this for 16 years. But yeah, for apparently the last 16 years, I've been hiring all these different types of designers. I kind of started working in kind of like the advertising and kind of digital marketing agency world in 2006. And back then it was quite fashionable to hire, Flash developers or or people with ActionScript experience, or I think before the concept of mobile first was a thing, I think I was concerned with hiring designers that kind of knew all the bugs of Internet Explorer. So yeah, I guess I've been doing this a minute. And I've worked for, yeah, like worked in the so-called ad world. I've worked for kind of design consultancies and technology consulting companies. And then most recently, I've worked in kind of, I guess what you could call like big tech. I work at Amazon now. I've been there a little over 5 years. And Motorola in Chicago before that. And I kind of saw that place, like Google owned the place for a minute when I started there. And then they sold the company to Lenovo. And so I kind of got a little bit of taste of Google recruiting, Lenovo recruiting on top of Motorola recruiting. So I've done this job in a kind of variety of different kind of places and contexts. As I mentioned, I work at Amazon now, and quick plug, not, probably heard of the place, but if you are curious to get to know the kind of design scene at Amazon, I might point you to amazon.design. I helped make this site a couple years ago for one thing, and so I'm fairly proud of it. And I think there's a lot of good content on there, and you can get to know a lot of our talented designers on there, like Luce. we still we still have Luce's biography video up on amazon.design. And so if you want to watch a video about her many hobbies, you can check her out here. We haven't taken it down, Luce. So unless you want me to, I'm going to leave it up.
I made some good bagels for that video.
Yeah. And briefly, if you are like, you can find design jobs at Amazon through amazon.design. Otherwise, the good way to job hunt at Amazon is through amazon.jobs. And then you can sort the jobs by design or Amazon design. And this, I swear, after this is my last slide about Amazon. I'll move on from here. But just a quick note, like if you are interested in like design jobs at Amazon, or any job at Amazon for that matter, if you have friends or former colleagues or coworkers that work at Amazon, rather than apply to job recs yourself, send them links to jobs that you're interested in and have them refer to you to those jobs. That makes your application go to the top of the stack, so to speak. And like we have a bit of a requirement even as recruiters that we have to look at those, and we have to review those referral candidates first before any other application. So, you know, pro tip on that. But okay, I promise I'll move on from Amazon. So okay, now I'm gonna try my best to just represent myself and kind of help you on this kind of journey of so you want a job as a UX designer. And that was the prompt that was given to me by SVC. But I think I'm going to go about answering this question in a slightly different way. I am going to talk about this guy here named Dieter Rams. He's a famous design person, and if you don't know who he is, I should definitely look him up. He and his 10 principles for good design are something to be familiar with. And so I have ripped off his 10 principles for good design and kind of made them into my own. I've taken a lot of his tips and kind of tried to frame it in terms of kind of good resume and portfolio design. And it's kind of, a lot of this is like how to present yourself as a designer. So I'm going to do my best to kind of go through his list of the 10 principles for good design and kind of factor them into, you know, again, resume, portfolio, job hunting tips, or a really more how to portray, in my opinion, how to portray yourself as a designer. So let me get into it. a lot of these slides won't make sense. So like they're just kind of conversation starters. But for the first principle, good design is innovative. I think what I want to try the point I want to get across here is that, like, as part of, SVC or any design education, you're going to be taught, the design process to apply and follow with this work. And really, in another word, this could be considered like a innovation process. And I mean, designers are storytellers, and so it's like you want to, tell a story with your portfolio about like and like how you present your work. And so what I'll talk about here is kind of balancing what goes into your portfolio. So I can talk about this in a couple different ways. And one way to think about it is like design inputs and design outputs, and that's what I have here with like, a lot of the user research work that goes into design, and inevitably portfolios have like pictures of whiteboards full of post-it notes, or someone conducting a user research study and looking over someone's shoulder, or doing some kind of card sorting activity here. And that's all well and good. And if you already have a bit of a design education, maybe you know a little bit about this, or if you're just getting into it now, you're about to learn about this. But I think you want to balance this with like, what are the outputs of those design research activities? So like, how do you synthesize that research into something that will inform your design work? So how does that turn into wireframes and design deliverables and other things that are represented here on the right? I think it's a balance. Like there's nothing worse than having like a designer have like a ton of content in their portfolio about process, and then they kind of get to like one single screen that they've designed as the outcome of that. That's always a little bit disappointing. And then similarly, like it's disappointing if like someone goes straight into showing UI without any evidence, without clarifying like what they did to kind of get there. So I'm interested in seeing kind of the evolution of one's design, and examples of iteration on your design work. So like I'm curious to see, and it's hidden in here, but like I'm curious to see how like sketches become, low fidelity prototypes that become higher fidelity prototypes that you might iterate on with research and testing, that becomes like a final design deliverable. I'm interested in that journey and seeing that journey in a portfolio. So that's why I include the asterisks here about kind of balanced storytelling. And okay, this is a quick Amazon thing. Amazon has this big thing on so-called STAR storytelling. So here's one other way to put it: is STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And Amazon did not invent this storytelling mechanism. It's just an industry thing that we really like, and that we look for when evaluating one's portfolio and evaluating one's portfolio presentation that you give as part of a UX design interview process with us. So, like, do clarify. Here's in my mind what goes into a good STAR storytelling is clarifying the user problem that you're trying to solve. You can frame it within like a certain kind of business problem context, but you should be bringing it back to like the user or customer problem that you're trying to solve. I think you want to be really clear about what your role is with this work. And and then also like, are you doing this as a team? And if so, like who's on that team and who's doing what and what did you do? I already talked like a little bit about like the process that we want to see So that's kind of the A for action in there. But you know, do conclude with like the results of your work. So I think that can take a couple different forms. That can be, you know, something quantitative in nature, like quantitative data that proves that this was successful design work because, you know, as a result of this work, you saw, you know, either site traffic go up or you saw kind of conversion rate go up from X to Y, or you know, results can also be kind of qualitative in nature, like just anecdotes from users or customers. That's so-called data as well. So basically, like with results, I mean, you just need to have an answer to like why that customer or user problem was is solved. So if you set up a problem in the first place, you need to be answering it by the end of your kind of portfolio kind of case study. So anyway, these are all things that I mean by like good design, or a good design process should be innovative. Is that like this, what I've just described, I think is kind of the innovation process or design kind of process to follow with you know, presenting, you know, UX design case studies. So, all right, I won't spend as much time on the other slides. There'll be, some of these will be quick. Like this one. This will take all of 30 seconds to talk about. Good resume and portfolio design is useful. So like, here's what I'm trying to say here is like apply kind of the design thinking process to like your resume and portfolio. Like think about what the purpose is of your resume or your portfolio website. Like I'll tell you that like a lot of design hiring managers, some will only look at your resume for as long as like they're hunting for the URL to click on to take them to your portfolio website. So have that like very clear on your resume. You'd be real surprised how many experienced designers apply to jobs with their resumes without any portfolio. It's near impossible for us to evaluate a designer without a portfolio. So like you basically are not ready to apply for jobs unless you have kind of both a resume and a portfolio put together, and your portfolio should be present, a link to it on your resume. If some of you have like industry work already that is under NDA or confidential for whatever reason, that's fine. Password protected if you must. But in your application, include the password to that on your website, or just include the password on your resume. Just make it easy for the users of your resume and portfolio to look at your work. So that's what I mean by just apply the kind of design thinking process to your resume and portfolio. This one will be quick and easy. Good design, a good resume design at least, is aesthetic. So okay, aesthetics is, there's a lot more to design than aesthetics. However, it certainly doesn't hurt. So like, here's my 2 cents is don't put your resume together using a Word doc. Sorry, any Microsoft people that might be on this call. And even like up your game from even like the Pages templates if you're a Mac user, is go with InDesign and either use a resume template there, or better still, lay out your own grid and make your own layout for your resume. So go with InDesign, and Adobe did not pay me for that plug. All right, some of these slides, I don't have visual aids for everything. This one's a little bit wordy. I'll focus, I won't read my made up quote that rips off Dieter Rams's quote, but I'll just read Dieter Rams's quote, is that good design makes a product understandable. It clarifies the product structure. Better still, it can make the product talk. At best, it is self-explanatory. So here's the point I want to get across with this particular good design principle. Take a step back from the work that you put in these portfolio case studies or projects that you're assembling right now, and like give yourself like 10 to 20 seconds to like browse through the entirety of that case study that you've put together, and then ask yourself, is it really clear what it is that I'm designing? Like I designed here a mobile banking app, but is that real clear just from like glancing at it in like 10-15 seconds? And like, here's one trick, is like find a friend or a family member that is not in design at all, doesn't know a thing about design, and have them look at the case studies that you put together, the projects you put together, and time them. Give them less than 30 seconds. Give them like 15 seconds or 20 seconds, something like that. Just like start from like the top and just kind of skim and scroll to the bottom, and then ask them like, do you know what I designed? Like, it's a website that does this for this type of brand. It's an app that reminds you to do this. Like, just like that's, I think, the sniff test for like the visual storytelling that you're doing in your portfolio. Like, it should be super obvious that like just from like the title slide of like it's a this it's a mobile banking app, it's something far more obscure, it's something I had this yesterday in a portfolio review. It was like it's a robotic manufacturing app, and it's like an app that you use to program a robot to kind of manufacture things on a manufacturing line. Like, so that's like super obscure, but like even still, like can I glean that at least from glancing at it over like 20-30 seconds? And then like if I can do that, then I'll invest the time to like start to fully read like all the text that you have in your case study on this work, or really kind of go through it again and really kind of invest in the details of it. But start with like the real quick, like just evaluate the visual storytelling that you're doing, not just like word for word every little nitty gritty detail, but just like the real quick pass is like, is it clear what this is? So that's what I mean by the understandable good design principle here. This one's fun. Good design is honest. So this stuff this is a little bit out of fashion, but it still creeps up every now and then. I don't see too many people these days referring to themselves as design ninjas or design pirates. But I do see a lot of people refer to themselves as a thought leader or a subject matter expert or things of this nature. And whenever I see that in resumes and portfolios, I always wonder like who gave you that title, and how did you like how are you accredited as a subject matter expert in that discipline? Like I always think these terms are a little bit BS-y, and I would encourage you to avoid these types of statements. Now instead, I think it is fun to kind of brand yourself. An example of this is this is from a friend of mine's resume. His name is Paul, and this watermark is his eyeglasses, and this was on his resume. And then he showed up to the interview wearing these glasses, And I thought that was pretty damn cool. And so like you can have fun with your resume and with your portfolio. You can brand yourself. You should, and you should, to kind of make yourself a little bit memorable and to stand out. And so this can be, um, I'm encouraging you to kind of throw in an emoji or an avatar or at least a little bit of color or a watermark or something else clever like that to kind of set yourself apart. So I would encourage you to do those types of things, but avoiding the stuff that's on the left here. And my last little point about good design being honest is don't write about yourself in the third person, either on your LinkedIn page or in your resume or in your portfolio or anywhere. I know that you wrote that about yourself. No one else wrote that about you. So I don't have use I and we and my in mine, kind of, use possessive kind of first person language. Don't refer to yourself in the third person. That's I always think bizarre. So don't do that. I'm going to actually disagree a tiny little bit with Mr. Rams. Good design is unobtrusive. Products fulfilling a purpose are like tools. They are neither decorative objects nor works of art. Their design should therefore be both neutral and restrained to leave room for the user's self-expression. There is good wisdom in that. However, that all sounds like pretty boring. and I would actually encourage you to like not just, to train yourself up to be competent in UX design, but then keep pushing yourself to kind of find kind of your own style with this work. And basically figure out how to make how to become a tastemaker in design. So this is, you don't have to be an influencer on social media and design or anything like that. Not like Liz is, but like just develop your own like kind of opinion on what is good design, and I actually do not mind to see a little bit of self-expression. And so how about this, like as you put together kind of projects in your portfolio, they should convey what I'll refer to as competence in kind of the standard design practices of today. And I would agree with everything that Larry mentioned earlier about like, learn Figma, learn design systems, and portray competence in these areas. But I think every good designer should have kind of one thing in their portfolio that's like kind of experimental and radical and different and a unique take on things. And so, okay, how should you go about doing that? Rip something off, like I've done with Dieter Rantz's 10 Principles for Good Design. Like take take Spotify and like rip it off and design a better Spotify for yourself, and just kind of teach yourself like how to kind of do things different. Like this shouldn't be the main project in your portfolio that you want to show off. Like you should be real clear that this is student work, or this is work I was doing to kind of teach myself. But I think you should learn the kind of modern conventions of UX design, and then you should learn how to break the rules. And so you should push yourself to do so. So this is what I'm saying in contrast to Mr. Rams's unobtrusive good design principle. This one's super short. I hate skill bar charts on resumes. So just don't do it. Just don't do it. Stop yourself. And if it's in your resume now, delete it. Please, 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 please. I hate this stuff. It kind of goes back to something I was saying earlier. Like, how like 10 out of 10 with like Figma or Sketch, like according to who? Like your own opinion? Like, and there's always a bigger fish. There's always going to be someone better. Just list the software that you're confident enough to list in a design resume, and please don't rate yourself. And please don't do what this kind of middle person did, is like rate your soft skills in terms of communication or leadership or teamwork or ambition. Super cringe. I hate skill bar charts. Don't do it. Um, this one should be like super simple, and it keeps on coming up time after time after time. So good design is thorough, consistent, and accurate down to the last detail. I'm going to use this one to just kind of hark on spelling and grammatical errors. Hopefully I didn't have any in my presentation so far. But like double, triple, quadruple check your work to make sure that it is free of spelling and grammatical errors. And if by chance, like anyone here is like English as a second language, like do, you know, find help from friends, family members, colleagues that can help you with this, and be absolutely certain that you have no typos or grammatical errors. Uh, uh, at least where I work at Amazon, like we will spot it every single time and have a real hard time moving past it when critiquing one's portfolio. And it most definitely can sink an entire, interview. So careful with this. The other little bit of content in here is just a fun little personal quirk, is consider what your personal email address says about you. I'd probably avoid using the old Hotmail burner email account for like where you want to have all the application stuff go to. Like just go with Gmail, or better still, your own personal domain for your email address. That shows better. I'll admit with this next good design principle, I had a hard time fitting it into like something that is resume and portfolio related. I think instead I've environmentally friendly. I'm going to turn this into like a mental model for how you want to portray yourself as a designer. There's if you're in the industry now, or if you're learning about the industry, like you'll hear a whole heck of a lot about kind of design thinking. And as I've talked about here already, like you'll want to convey that you are familiar with the design process, and you want to portray that in your portfolio. But somewhere in there, you also need to portray yourself as a maker of design. And so I think that's something that's missing in a lot of design education right now, is that like it's all about the process and actually not a whole lot about kind of craft and excellence with the tools themselves and with the design output. I'm encouraged to hear that you are like there's something as specific as classes in Figma being offered by SVC. So like get past design thinking and portray yourself as a design maker, and like keep practicing to kind of sharpen your design craft. Because if you don't, I think you'll be caught in an interview setting. And this is from one of my good designer friends. This quote, Luz knows this person, is you don't want to portray yourself as all talk and no crayons. Instead, you want to portray yourself as a maker, that you can produce this stuff that you're talking about. So anyway, that's my stretch for um, good design is environmentally, mostly mentally friendly. Just kind of different disposition. Good design is as little design as possible. This was a fad for a while, but it still comes up every now and then, is the infographic resume. Not a fan. You don't need to get you don't need to put this much work into your resume. Use that InDesign template that I referred to earlier, or one of, or InDesign template of choice, to make your own InDesign template. You don't have to get quite this crazy. So like, so that's a quick word on resumes. Now, as for portfolios, notice the tiny wireframe in here. This just happened today in a portfolio review. This is not it. This is the wireframe I saw in a presentation. This is just an example, but it's actually really close to the wireframe I saw, where it was about that big on a slide. And the candidate had like a bunch of text next to that wireframe explaining what they were doing in there, but the wireframe was presented as that small. And then they moved on to the next slide. And one of my good design friends, who was an interviewer on this interview loop, she stopped the candidate and said, "Oh, excuse me, could you go back to the previous slide? Can you zoom in on that wireframe? And would like to see the details, even if it's a low fidelity wireframe. But can you tell me, explain the top navigation? What did you do with that? What is this navigation on the left? And are these were these your ideas to kind of arrange things in this place? And then did you test this with users and researchers? And basically, this candidate had just said, like, I did a wireframe and kind of moved on to the next thing. And it was not like, I think the thinking was actually fine as soon as the candidate described why they arranged the top nav the way they did and that sort of thing. And they had, in fact, done some user testing on it. But they didn't show that in the portfolio presentation. And yeah, it was about that tiny on this slide that they had. So don't do that. Bigger, please. And that is my 10 principles for good resume and portfolio design. I hope that gave you some stuff to think about. And here's my LinkedIn again if you want to connect with me. But I'm happy to take questions.
I'll just pipe in to say a couple things here. If you would like to just unmute and throw your question at Chris, please do so. And you can also throw them in the chat and we'll make sure that they get to him. And if you have questions about, well, what's a career in UX really like, I'm volunteering Luz to handle those, because she has filled those shoes. So either what's the job like, or how to get the job, we can deal with both of those kinds of questions.
Or if you'd like to see me and Chris role play some of those interview scenarios, like star questions.
I'd be happy to do that, Liz.
That would be
at this very moment I can't see the chat. So actually, let me go. I can bring it up.
There are no new questions at chat at this time.
Okay.
We'll give you all a chance to throw some in there. Or again, just come off mute and lay it on us.
I'll volunteer.
All right, I have a question.
I heard Maureen first.
I think Maureen goes first.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. I was just wondering, from a hiring manager's perspective, Chris, what would a good portfolio look like for a junior level role? Like, what are maybe 3 things that you would want to see demonstrated in the portfolio that would help that junior level with no design experience get noticed?
Well, yeah, there's kind of like it's the kind of classic question of like, you got to have experience to get experience. And so I don't think you can portray yourself as like, even as a junior designer that's kind of breaking in, like you still need work to show, even if it's all just like self-made or done in school. So you still need a portfolio. You still need, I'd say at least 3 projects or case studies to share that show some amount of kind of breadth and depth. And how about this? Like, this was kind of littered throughout the presentation, but like, I think you still need to convey that something along the lines of kind of good storytelling. You need to have good storytelling and good visual storytelling going on in your portfolio. More than ever, and again, it's kind of encouraging that like there's some kind of classes dedicated to it at SVC, but like more than ever, you need to convey familiarity with design systems. So this is related to kind of mastering the tool of the minute right now, which is Figma. It'll be something else next year, and something else the year after that. But kind of, how about this? Like, even with like your kind of educational work, you'll still need to, I think, convey some competence and understanding of like how to deliver that work to, if we're talking about UX design, deliver that work to like a developer or engineering partner that like can build that. And so like with learning Figma and learning design systems, you'll learn how to kind of break design down into components and how to organize those components. And then like the purpose of that is to help build the thing that you're designing. And so that's usually where like a developer or engineer kind of comes into play. So you should have like perspectives on how to kind of make an engineer's life easier with that kind of work. So like, even as a junior designer with no experience, if you can't cite experience where you've gone to war with an engineering team of like implementing your design work, I think you still need to have like perspectives on how this would work and how this would get built. So that's important. And then yeah, like I'll kind of bring it back to like concept of tastemaking. And let me talk about that in a different way. Like tastemaking does not have to be just about visuals or aesthetics with like your design work. Like there could be so-called tastemaking that's happening even with like the wireframing that you're doing and like kind of the more architectural kind of rule-making work that you do as a UX designer. And so I still think that like you should find ways to like convey that you're not only competent in that, but then you have like different ideas and perspectives on like, here's how to do it like kind of differently, that like I thought this up. It made sense to me when I was like kind of learning this stuff. And like I thought to do it a different way. And like you'll need to find something like that to set yourself apart from everyone else. Yeah. So like I'd bring it back to those concepts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks. It's a lot to think about.
I know, that's a lot.
Yeah. David, I'd like to suggest, why don't you go ahead and ask your question, then we'll go to the chat questions.
And Chris, do you mind stopping sharing your screen so you'll be able to see more faces as you there we go. Yeah. As we go through. Thank you.
Yes.
David, you.
David.
Oh no, these questions in the chat are much better than the one I had. I just wanted to get the ball rolling, be that instigator. So
good man.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll come back around. How about that?
Where to start?
Let's start with Lisa, who asked, what are the day-to-day tasks for someone doing UX design? There's a
There's a lot.
Try to keep your
I-
answer to under 3 hours.
yeah.
Sorry. I think well, no day is the same. I can probably say that. But I think it depends on, you know, the phase that you're in with like your UX design work. So hopefully you're able to carve out some time kind of doing kind of some amount of user research and kind of, you know, thinking about the problem that you're trying to solve. So you're like distilling the work down into like, what is the main user or customer problem that needs to be solved here, and like what research activities can I pursue to gain an understanding of that. There's and it's just kind of like raw kind of intake of these kind of inputs. There's a lot of time you could spend, you know, day to day on the job, kind of like synthesizing or making sense of all that research work and finding patterns and kind of figuring out what did I learn from doing this research work. So you could spend days or weeks on that alone. Now whether
It's
your
true.
project whether your project affords you that amount of time is another thing, but anyway.
Where does
there's
the research come from? Like where,
Yeah.
who provides it? I mean, is there like a, you know, what's the source?
Good question. There's like you can break it down into primary and secondary research. So like secondary research is like, you know, what data, what do we already have? What do we already know about the users or customers of this product? Like, do we have, like for example, like is your project to redesign a website or an app that exists today, that is in use today by real customers and users? And so like, what do you already know about usage of that app or site or whatever it is? And then like maybe primary research could be like, okay, you're like you're doing what would be referred to as like generative design research work to kind of you know, meet with those users and figure out kind of like how they're using that product or service, and kind of you're kind of like, can I watch you complete a you know, buy something on this website, and like can I watch like how you shop, and like okay, you've put stuff into the cart but then you clicked back a few times to like try and return to that thing and make some edits. And so maybe that's teaching you something about like, oh, the user flows off, like the person puts something into the cart but then is clicking back a few times in the browser, and then maybe they get frustrated by that process, and maybe they abandon kind of buying something because they got lost in the process. Like it's almost like you're observing human behavior and figuring out not just what they tell you, but like kind of watching them and kind of figuring out what they, even like the things that are unspoken are some of the most interesting kind of you know, insights about how someone uses a product or service. So so that what I've referred to is what, yeah, this broad category of like generative design research. And then there's evaluative design research where like you already have a design and like you're testing that with a user. So like, hey, I've designed this, can I kind of talk to you about it, and kind of can I get your opinions on this, your feedback on this, can I watch you go through this and do that? So that would be evaluative design research. So there's generative and evaluative, like, but that's all that can go into research. Luce, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, actually, well, since I'm not an employee of Amazon, I can tell you what my experience was.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of my favorite ways of validating or gathering customer information was through customer reviews on Amazon.com. Like that is a very public way of listening to our customers, how they're experiencing certain things. I was part of a team that got to go sit in and listen in on customer service calls as well. So like, at least speaking from my experience at Amazon, there's a, the view of how you gather that data is really wide, but anything that gets you close to the customer was really great. Chris, I wanted to ask you kind of on that note,
Mhm.
the UX design family is pretty broad as well in
Yeah.
terms of roles. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that is true. The term UX designer is used like very broadly, but there's a lot that goes into it. Uh, uh, if you come across a job that's like simply UX designer, it's probably assumed that like this is the cliche term here is like a full stack UX designer, someone that can do a little bit of everything. They're kind of a UX design generalist. And they're kind of familiar with like the entirety of kind of the UX design process. But I see that job as like a spectrum where there's on one end there's visual design, and on the other end there's interaction design. So interaction design is kind of the architectural work that goes into this, like the kind of the the wireframing, the rule making, like you're thinking about how the users use this product or service, and you're kind of defining that path through how they go about completing this task and solving a problem for them. Now, throughout that, there's a lot of visual design, and this is the layout of the kind of design elements on this website or app or whatever it is that we're talking about. But this involves color, and that's used, typography, pictures, imagery, photography. Like this is all visual design or basically graphic design, interactive graphic design. So there's some designers that, depending on their backgrounds, like they are coming from more of a visual design background or maybe a more of an interaction design background. And like, I can almost, in evaluating a portfolio, I can almost kind of plot a point on like this person's here on the spectrum. And yeah, maybe you should try and do that assessment of yourself of like where you are and where you want to go deep, and you'd probably find that there's a job there for you. Now, at a place like Amazon, we use the term, like all those job titles you saw me put into at the beginning of my presentation, like there are UX visual designers, there are interaction designers, there's UX sound designers, there's UX motion designers, there are voice designers or voice user interface or VUI designers. Apple calls their people conversational designers. So like we're not even talking about designing with a graphical user interface. We're talking about designing with like voice interactions. So it's still an information architecture job of like decision trees and that sort of thing, but it's with it's like spoken word from like Alexa or the Google Assistant or Siri or whoever. So yeah, these are all different types of UX design jobs. Does that answer your question, Liz?
It does. It does. I think the point was to show that there is a broad
Yeah,
world
I figure
UX
that's where
design. Yeah,
figure that's where you're
not
going
just
with that.
wireframes.
Yeah, like you certainly can, and like going nerding out on good wireframing is not a bad thing. There's just, and like you should make yourself an expert in that, but like there's a whole lot else to it as well.
I think Todd asked a question about what's the best way to get started in UX design and what type of education is required. And I don't know if you missed the beginning presentation, but a great way to get started is through School of Visual Concepts.
That's for sure about that.
Yeah. Oh, you're not supposed to say that, Larry.
Oh, sorry.
Chris, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I was in the design industry for 20 years, and I do not have a college degree. I have an associate's degree, and I dropped out of design school and ended up forging my own career, which was really hard. But I made it all the way to Amazon. So it turned out okay in the long run. But I've worked around people who have varying levels of design education, whether it's running through a certificate program like Amazon all the way up to PhD programs in like really hyper specific design competencies. So but to get started in UX design, Chris, do you have any just kind of industry insights?
I mean, you just need to start soaking up design like a sponge. I mean, like, so like a program like at SVC would be great. If you do, I mean, like depends on how much you want to invest in your education in design, but like I think one way or another, you just need to start making. And if you want a job as UX designer, it's all about having a portfolio. And so like I said it earlier, where like some or many design managers and design leaders that I know are only looking at your resume for so long, like it should be like nicely laid out and everything as I talked about. But like some of us are only looking at resume for like the 5 to 10 seconds that like we're looking for a URL to click to take us to your portfolio, and from there we want to see not only competent but excellent design work. So like you just need to like start like getting yourself there by like kind of making and like throwing out the bad stuff and like just iterating on the bad stuff and like keep going. Like so even like with like if you are going to enroll in a program like this, and like you'll be kind of time boxed with your education here, even afterwards, keep going and keep iterating with it, and keep kind of nerding out on it. So you kind of need to have a little bit of an obsession with this, but it is doable. And because you mentioned it, Luce, like I think people that are changing careers, like bring like no matter what your background is, like have that be like the interesting thing about like I come from finance and accounting, but I made a new accounting or finance app or something because of that, because I was tired of like these products I used, like they all sucked, and I wanted to do better with them. And so like have that be your thing, have that be your angle. Or like if you're coming from like a more traditional graphic design or illustration backgrounds, like great, like so do include that work along with like this kind of UX design stuff that you're learning. So like we're looking, I'd like to see the kind of breadth of people's work, but like yeah, you just need to start cranking out like and start making work for yourself.
One of my favorite portfolio reviews ever was one of SVC's grads who was a dentist, who started out as a dentist and turned into a UX designer. And it was
Cool.
one of the most interesting introductions, and even the way that she talked about one of the things that how she learned she wasn't cut out for dentistry, but she was cut out for UX design. And she made this like brilliant connection around like I had to become like super attuned to people's needs because my hands are in their mouth or fixing their teeth. That helped me become really attuned to my users' needs as a UX designer. So it doesn't really matter where you're coming from. Wherever you're at right now you're bringing knowledge that's really valuable to the field wherever you're at.
I want to say on that note, like I mean, yeah, I tell as you present yourself, as you if you are kind of new to getting into the design world, like don't be apologetic about this other experience you have. Just say why this, like convince us that like this is what makes you a better or a good UX designer because of this experience, and like tell us in your portfolio or on your website or whatever you put together, like tell your audience the conclusions you want them to draw from this. So just skip to like, I come from this background and it makes me a better designer because this, and have a perspective on that, and don't be apologetic about it. Yeah.
And I think on that note, so I'm going to bring up Christian's question about, so he has a two-part question. I'm going to we'll come back to question number 1, which is about current design technologies. But the question is around, is it necessary for designers to know how to code? Which is kind of in that realm of like, what kind of education should you be looking at coming into UX design? Chris, do you have an opinion about that? I have an opinion.
It's not required. However, big plus if you can design and code, so to speak. So that this will be if you don't know how to code, this is going to be a much larger investment on your part to learn. But like, yeah, the tools, all the design tools today, modern design tools, they make it pretty easy to kind of design something of like pretty high fidelity. But at the very least, you should kind of know what it would take to build this thing that you're designing in HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Like, you should have at least some opinions on these things. And a gigantic plus if you know how to quote design and code. I'd say at least a familiarity with how, you know, these technologies work and how it changes your design, and how it might alter the pixel perfection that you've set out to design in the first place, and how that might change. You should be familiar at least, yeah.
Yeah, you'll find yourself in situations where you may not necessarily be like building something out, but you may be working on a design team that is, or a design system team that you have to specify like the specific colors of a particular value. You need to be able to understand the difference between fixed width and variable width. Again, even if you're not the actual like coding out the particular application, the more vocabulary you have around how something is supposed to look or be built, it'll be beneficial.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm going to bump back up to Nina's question. Is UX design valued in the social impact field? What are some of the ways UX designers make a positive difference in the world?
Yes. And in terms of like how, yeah, now, I mean, UX design is a problem-solving discipline. It's a lot about design craft and using these tools and things, but like, you do have to kind of strip it away. It's like you're helping people accomplish things and solve problems, and good design can help with that. So yes to like how it can make a social impact. And like you need to, and like you can apply UX design to anything and have it kind of benefit that field. Like you're solving problems, and so if you want to make a social impact, whatever your passion is or whatever program you're involved in, good UX design can make a big difference with that. So you need to figure out like what problems need to be solved in this space, and then again, I kind of do that research in terms of like what can I do to kind of create something that kind of make this better.
For sure. For every difficult tech experience out there, you know that there was an army of UX designers that were fighting it. Speaking from experience, not saying where, but you're, as a UX designer, you are absolutely the advocate for your customers. You are the heartbeat. You are there to represent and advocate for your customers' needs in as broad a sense as you possibly can, whether it's from like, we should really think about reducing the packaging in these certain things, or hey, have we thought about how like an example when on the Alexa team was like, oh, we should have a night mode. So if you're using an Alexa device as a nightlight, it doesn't shout announcements in the middle of the night while your baby is trying to sleep. Maybe we could be considerate about parents in that way. which is something that may not have made it onto a business requirements document, but it may have been something that said, hey, I'm aware that we have a lot of moms who use this product, or I'm aware that we've got people who care passionately about from particular background or have particular needs. Your job is there to advocate heavily for that. Let's see. Let's go back to Christian's first question, and then Eli, I see your question about how to lay out big projects like websites, which is every designer's favorite thing to put on their portfolio. It's tough. But let's maybe start with current design technologies, and then we can move on to Eli's question. What are some of the current software technologies that y'all
Learn Figma. It was the tool of the minute was Sketch. Now it's Figma. It'll always benefit you to be familiar with the Adobe Creative Suite, like Photoshop, InDesign, etc. But let's see, like InVision, Proto.io, but like I don't know, but it's really like Figma first, focus, and a little bit of Sketch and a little bit of Adobe Creative Suite. But there's like, here's like, don't get too hung up on the tools. Like the tools, this is why I hate those skill bar charts on the tools. Is that like the tools will change. Like I promise you, it'll be in 18 months from now, some other design tool will be the new fad. So like you're gonna have to like learn, but for now, learn Figma. But like you have to be fluid with this and like just portray that like, I can pick up anything in terms of whatever the contemporary tool is. So like have that attitude. But like for now, right now, March 30th, 2022. It's Figma.
It's Figma.
Yeah.
And then Eli had a question about how to display work when you have really long, huge images of a screen or different flows. So imagine you've got like a nice long website that has like lots of different sections on it, or has multiple pages of complexity. Do you have any tips for that?
I'm thinking, I'm not entirely sure, like, because I'm wondering, like, if it's a website, how could you not portray it on a website? But like massive. Here, go ahead, Luz. Do you have an idea?
I do have an idea, and I was also going to say, if anyone else wants just some additional like portfolio building tips afterwards, I can stay on for a few minutes afterwards. Happy to talk through some more specific examples if you have any burning questions as well. For things that are long, I would say maybe if you have a link to show the full experience, show the link, take us to be able to do the scrolling in situ. If you can break it out into smaller chunks so we can understand like the parts that are important that you worked on. It's not always necessary to see the whole thing. Oh, I see. So it might not be live anymore. Perhaps it was never made. If you have a prototype, that's also really helpful to see at the very least.
Yeah, I was thinking like embedded videos of like navigating through the site, but if it's not live anymore, the prototype, like, or even like a GIF showcase, like kind of showcasing a little bit of motion, like, or but like if you can maybe embed a video perhaps of like you zooming in on stuff and kind of navigating through things, like that could be helpful. And by the way, like motion elements catch the eye in a portfolio. But yeah, that's kind of what comes to mind.
Let me see if I can get you some examples as we're closing out. I think we have time for one more question. Does anybody else have anything you'd like to ask Chris? David, that's your cue. What was your instigator
Oh,
question?
yeah.
I got to sneak in my question. That one that I have is very close to mine, so I am
Okay.
satisfied. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I think we'll hang around. Does anyone want any additional specific questions about their portfolio? Well, I'll hang around for another 15, 20 minutes if you want to sit and chat about that. But otherwise, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your experience and advice. This can be a nerve-wracking experience applying for jobs and trying to make sure that you're hitting all the right notes. And thank you for sharing your perspective as a recruiter on how to present your best work.
Absolutely. This is fun.
And may I also pipe in to thank you, Luz, for participating tonight and bringing Chris our way. And Chris, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure thing.
Evenings are kind of, not work time. So for you to come in and spend this with us is really appreciated. We can't say enough about that. And all of you who gave up part of your evening to join us, you are also appreciated, and we thank you for being here. Sounds like, Luz, you're going to stick around for a bit. I'll stick around too. If anybody wants to ask questions about our certificate programs, I'm happy to answer those.
Yeah.
And if you got to go, have a good evening. And thank you again, everyone, for coming.
Excellent. Thank you all. Larry, do you mind stopping the recording and we'll.
I'm on it.
Excellent.